This will be a reading of the extraordinary Christmas story for a particular Madeline Quinn Lewanowski by her elder sister Catherine Scott Lewanowski in the land of the Californians, down here below Oregon. Let me adjust my glasses. Okay, there they are. Yes, they're good. And put on the music. No, that would be a bad idea because we're reading a book. Okay. Now let me open the book to the first page. This will be a reading of the extraordinary story of Christmas, as you've never heard it before. I can assure you, never heard it before, because I'm making it up as I go. Shh. Once upon a time, in a land not far, far away, but actually very, very close, there lived a young gentleman named Ezekiel. Ezekiel was born with odd-shaped ears. He was teased for a majority of his life. Because of this, he spent a great majority of his young childhood in his father's workshop making toys for himself. His friends, thinking he was dumb, would call him mean names and not let him play with him. Sometimes this hurt Ezekiel's feelings. As a side note, you should know that Ezekiel's last name was Elfington. This may be important in the rest of the story, but we haven't reached that point yet. So Ezekiel would make these toys and make these toys. Sometimes they were exciting toys, like robots. Sometimes they were not exciting toys, like apple graters. But you can't be picky when all you're stuck with is making toys. And sometimes he ran out of stuff to make toys, and so he would make toys out of carrots and potatoes. And then his mother would call it stew, and she would eat it. You know, make everything useful. When it would snow, he would make ginormous snowmen, and they would come to life, and he would call them Frosty, and Frosty, and Frosty, and Fristy, and Fristy. But pretty much only Frosty became popular, and you can read about the story of Frosty the Snowman today, every winter, in books like the one I'm reading today. But I liked Fristy. Fristy was a nice snowman. At least that's what I hear from Ezekiel's friends, the ones that were nice to him. Anyway, so Ezekiel made toys and played with snowmen that he named Fristy, Frosty, Frasty, Frusty, and Frosty, and Frusty, and other names of likes. He had no siblings, which was very sad, because siblings are good for all people. However, his mother was kind, and his dad was very fat because he ate a lot of Christmas cookies all year round, because he really liked Christmas cookies. And sometimes people called him Santa Claus, although he was not Santa Claus, he just looked like Santa Claus. At this point in history, Santa Claus was not really invented, it was just a myth. However, this gave Ezekiel an idea. If there were people like him who were outskirts in society, perhaps they could form a union and live somewhere, making everyone happy. So, he formed a club with other people in his community. They were all people that had strange-looking ears and liked to make toys in their spare time in their father's garages. He named the club after his last name, and they called themselves the Elves. So all day long, they would make toys and sing songs and make snowmen. Sometimes they would drink hot chocolate. And they would chitter-chatter about Christmas and happiness and the children that didn't make them happy, but how they wished everyone would be happy because they were happy individuals. and how they wished Santa Claus was real, and how they wished everyone would just get along and love each other. And this gave Ezekiel a better idea. What if they moved somewhere like the North Pole and made this into a small community of elves, and then they could make toys for everyone every year for Christmas? It was a fantastical idea, and so when he grew up, he decided that he would start putting money into a piggy bank named Rhinoceros Rex. It was shaped after a dinosaur. And then, that way, he could save money and build a small cottage in the middle of the North Pole where it's really cold. And then he could build a lot of cottages and invite up all his elfie friends. And then they could make toys for all the boys and girls of Christmas. But there was only one problem. Santa Claus wasn't real at this point. You see, Santa Claus was just an advertising part of Coca-Cola Industries. Some way to make profit, some way to get people to buy cold, refreshing Coca-Cola over the Christmas season. Ezekiel didn't like this marketing scheme, but he was going to take advantage of it. So he contacted lots and lots of models that worked for Coca-Cola to see if any of them would like to come up and move to the North Pole. However, most of the models, although they were big, fat, and white-bearded men, lived in LA, where it was nice and warm and toasty outside, so the thought of moving somewhere very frigid and cold year-round didn't appeal to them. But then he remembered his father, who, had I mentioned, looked like Santa Claus. He enticed his father to come up to the North Pole, where they would constantly have Christmas cookies, and he had also enticed him into delivering the presents with the promise of Christmas cookies being at every house. So that is how the tradition of Santa Claus came to be, and Christmas cookies. And that is also how the elves came to be, because Ezekiel Elfington, who was not very liked by his friends because of his strange ears, and spent the majority of its time making toys, formed a band of peace-loving little individuals who ended up moving to the snow and making toys for fun, and then deciding everyone should be happy, and so they gave them away. And that's also how Frosty came to be. Rudolph is a different story. I shall now progress with that, because what you see on TV, kids, I'm a little bit concerned is wrong. You might be interested to know, actually, that Rudolph is not a reindeer. Based on his nose size and color, it would appear that he is a mix of a basset hound and a bald eagle and a leftover triceratops and small pony and maybe a teenage child with a large zit. I know you're thinking, how is this possible? You don't ask such questions when it comes to myths and legends, may I warn you. It's Rudolph. He also flies. We'll continue on with the story now. So this, let us say, flying beast, Rudolph, who actually uses branches as horns because he did not want to appear misfitting with the reindeer that Santa used as a sleigh, thought that perhaps he could be of service with his light bulb extension of a facial adjustment, and also because of his intense flying capabilities. However, because the fact that he was A, not a reindeer, and B, a weird concoction of such animosity, which is not the word I was going for, but continue with it. Back to the story. Because of these reasons, many of the reindeer and even Santa Claus giggled at him. Like Ezekiel Elfington, this made him sad. He spent the majority of his days in a cave eating cauliflower, which made his nose less red. Little known fact. In fact, to make his nose red, he often had to eat cinnamon candy, which is why candy canes are popular around Christmas time, and children can often be seen extending their candy of Christmas towards Rudolph as an extension of love and harmony, and to power his red nose as he leads Santa Claus through the evening. But back to the story. sad and discouraged and in his cave with no one around, and the one-of-a-kind mixture of the different species that he was, confused about his birth parents because he had been adopted on the ranch of the elves early in his childhood. He was hurt by his exclusion from the racing team and just confused about his future in general. He had heard the Easter Bunny might have some room on his carrot-growing farm, but he didn't think that appealed to him either. He heard the different donkeys that worked there plowing among the fields weren't very nice either, so he really thought it best that he stay at the North Pole where he belonged. But did he belong? That was the question. So he continued to eat some candy canes and cauliflower, and weakened day by day. But finally, Ezekiel took it into his own hands. He saw exactly what was happening with Rudolph and said, this is exactly what happened to me back in the day when I wasn't allowed to play games with my friends back in the world of humans. So I'm going to talk with Santa Claus, which, remember, was his father. So we had that pull of the whole I'm your son thing. And, excuse me while I cough for a moment. Thank you. So he talked to Santa Claus and he said, "Sir, I don't think you understand the agreement that we had here. I told you that you could work for me and get Christmas cookies if you did what I said and what was in the contract." And Santa Claus said, "Well, you see, I will do what I want when I want to do it and with whom I want to do it. And these reindeer you got me are pretty freaking sweet. They're like practically the rims and the crew of flying apparatus. So I'm pretty sweet out, I'm good to go." And Ezekiel said, "You got the wrong idea, Mr. Claus, aka Daddy, because you see, Mr. Rudolph over there has a lot to offer your team, and I think you're missing the point by looking at appearances alone. If you really dwell on the fact that he could really light up the night with that 100-watt bulb on his nose, I think you could really be benefit from that. Never mind the fact that, he breathes fire and that he might have a bit of an acidic fart problem. He really could do you some good. And he's great company. He tells some mighty fine jokes." And Mr. Claus said, I don't know. I feel uncomfortable about that. And I don't really want to disclose the rest of this conversation in this story because the book kind of skips a few pages. I think some people might have still took it out, because I'm looking in here and I see some ripped pages in here. But anyway, I think in sum, what happened was that Ezekiel just told his dad, no more Christmas cookies, buddy. One less person, 10 less pounds. So eventually, Mr. Claus got the idea, and he agreed. And so, Rudolph came to say, Santa came to say, "Rudolph, with your nose so bright, won't you guide my sleigh tonight?" And, there we have the childhood adapted version, but now that you children are old enough to hear the real story, the ultimate story of Christmas, I'm going to keep reading. Yes, so that is how Rudolph came to be a part of the Christmas bobsled team of Saint Nick. Excuse me again. Interesting story. So Ezekiel Elfington was actually the first Saint Elf adopted into the Catholic Church as a saint for his work with the elves back in the early 1600s. However, it obviously is Saint Nick that is the most publicized. The problem with this is that obviously on the ranch there's only one Saint Nick and like 1,500 elves. So even though Ezekiel Elfington is the one with the notorious name and the face and the image and the idea, it was really Santa Claus that took over the operation and whose name came to be the namesake of everything non-Christ about Christmas. You know what I mean? So good for Ezekiel, bad for his publicity. Can I get an amen? So moving on with the story, kids. I'm flipping through these pages looking for another segment that I might want to read. Oh, I'm going to tell... Oh, this is a good one. Here. The time the Disney princesses visited Santa Claus. It's great. It really is, let me tell you, because You know, sometimes we wonder, are we the only ones that believe in Santa Claus? Answer, maybe. But it appears that not only do we maybe not believe in Santa Claus, but Disney princesses do. And it looks here that Cinderella visited. She asked for a new mother and new sisters. And Little Mermaid visited Santa Claus, asked for new legs. Jasmine visited Santa Claus and asked for a prince as well. Also for a tiger, which she actually got. That was earlier in her life. So boom, yay for Santa. And additionally, looking through here, Mulan asked for salvation from the Huns. She pretty much just took that on her own strength, sometimes, point of that story, kind of reflecting on some of these. Cinderella, she turned away from Santa Claus. She went to her fairy godmother. Little Mermaid went to an evil witch. So, we really didn't see Santa Claus in these movies that we know, but truth be told, they still have the Christmas spirit going. Anyway, so that's interesting, So lastly, before I close up tonight, the story of the Christmas tree. Because, it's interesting. We all put these cut down trees in our house. But do we know why? I don't think so. I don't think so at all. And here's why. Ezekiel Elfington, back in the day, snowball fights, okay? We're getting out of hand between the elves and the trolls that would come towards the North Pole. And if you know anything about trolls, they're the elves of the South Pole. And they're quite naughty individuals. They never make it onto the nice list. And reading according to the story, it says, this particular year, back in the elf year of 1999,646, which I don't know how that translates into our traditional years here, people, but just so you know. The trolls had been causing much harm and disaster upon the elf workstations, trying to keep Christmas from happening on schedule, to create chaos and anarchy in the world, and trying to defeat hope, peace, generosity, and love amongst human beings. Their most recent attempts had been covering houses in maple syrup, throwing mini marshmallows into chimneys so that they expanded into large, s'more-packed chimneys. This is good. Letting chocolate sauce freeze on the on paths in between houses so that the elves would slip on it unsuspecting. A lot of food-related things going on here. I don't know where they have such access to yumminess, but I want to go. However, the traditional snowball fight was always the most epic battle between the elves and the trolls because it could be decided by a clean sweep of a team, similar to how capture the flag might solve a problem or a dispute between a 5th grade or 6th grade class. Similar to battles along human shores, it was a winner-take-all mentality. Teams would line up on opposite sides of the field and storm the troops until no one stood alive. Instead of actually dying, because as soon as elves or trolls signed their life over to the life of elfitude or trollitude, they lived in semi-long lives, different than our human lives, so they couldn't die according to a snowball fight. However, they had their own rules and their own way of deciding. So these snowball fights went on for a very long time, especially because they were ending in a lot of ties. This year it was getting much more competitive than normal because the trolls were so much more determined to stop Christmas and the elves were more determined than ever to save it. St. Nick, being more lazy than ever, was simply sitting on his couch in front of the fire, drinking hot chocolate and eating Christmas cookies. Good to see he's concerned about the state of Christmas, right? However, In an attempt to keep the elves from winning, the trolls dug deep into the ground to create fortresses of surprise attacks. And so when the elves would storm the field, they would jump out, catch them, and bury them in the snow. The trolls having a full foot advantage on the elves. The elves, in retaliation, would climb the trees and pelt them from above. The trolls then would cut down the trees, and so the elves could not climb them. This kind of brutal attack would go back and forth for months. Suddenly, Christmas was approaching quickly, and all these trees were cut down and holes were dug in the snow. In an attempt to make the forest look revitalized, the elves, in a quick attempt to make Christmas spirit come back, planted the trees in the snow and put snowballs into the tree boughs for decoration because they thought it was beautiful. And the fact that as the snow war was continuing, some snowballs would just get collected in there anyway. Finally, the elves rose triumphant as the trolls got cold. Remember, they're used to the South Pole. That isn't really true. I think this book is a little bit wrong because, obviously the South Pole just is as snowy as whatever. Anyway, but regardless, I think they missed their wives and their small children and their penguins, and so they went home, leaving the elves to the duty of finishing their last-minute packing for Christmas, celebrating with some apple cider and marshmallow cookies, getting Santa ready in his suit, and sending him off. What was left were trees covered with glistening white icicles and beautiful white balls, and topped with the stars dazzling from above the sky. This inspired the tradition, and by the next year, the elves were helping the humans set up trees and decoration, and in celebration of their triumph over the nasty trolls who were trying to stop Christmas. You might think that the trees are some other kind of symbol of life and hope and beauty, but no, it is simply another symbol of how Ezekiel Elfington and his fellow merry lads up in the North Pole are good people, just trying to help us humans appreciate life and each other and Christmas. So that, my friends, is just one segment from this storybook, The Ultimate Story of Christmas, read by me, Catherine Lewandowski, for her sister. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope you tune in next time. Goodbye.